Imagine discovering that your own sister declared you dead and has been living off your pension in Florida for 5 years while you kept working thinking there was just a delay in the paperwork. But that was just the beginning of a web of lies that would destroy my entire family and reveal secrets that go back decades. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 66 years old, and this is the story of how my sister Sarah didn't just steal my identity and retirement, but orchestrated the most elaborate family betrayal I could have ever imagined. I had been working at the Bethlehem Steel Mill for 42 years when I turned 65 and decided it was time to retire. My wife Margaret and I had been planning this for years. We were going to travel, spend time with our grandchildren, and finally enjoy the fruits of 4 decades of hard labor. I filed all the paperwork for my pension in January 2019, expecting to start receiving payments within a few months. Margaret was so excited, she had already started planning our first vacation to visit our son Michael in California. But months turned into a year, and every time I called the pension office, they gave me the runaround about processing delays and missing documentation. The woman on the phone, Linda, became familiar with my voice because I called so often. She would always say the same thing: "Mr. Mitchell, these things take time. The system is backlogged. Just be patient." I was frustrated but figured these things take time, so I kept working part-time jobs to pay the bills while waiting for my pension to kick in. Margaret started getting worried about our finances. Our savings were dwindling, and she had to go back to work part-time at the local grocery store at age 63, something she had hoped never to do again. The stress was affecting our marriage. She would say things like, "Bob, other people get their pensions on time. Why is ours taking so long?" I didn't have answers, and it was eating me alive watching my wife work when she should have been enjoying retirement. Meanwhile, my sister Sarah, who had always been the black sheep of the family, suddenly seemed to have come into money. Sarah had been a train wreck most of her adult life. She had been married 3 times, filed for bankruptcy twice, and had a drinking problem that had cost her several jobs over the years. Our parents had always worried about her, and when they passed away, they left most of their estate to me because they didn't trust Sarah with money. But in early 2019, everything changed for Sarah. She moved from her cramped apartment in Detroit to a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Miami Beach. When I asked her about it during our rare phone conversations, she claimed she had gotten lucky with some investments and a small inheritance from our deceased Aunt Martha. She said she had been secretly saving money and playing the stock market. I was happy for her, thinking she had finally turned her life around after years of financial struggles. What really convinced me was how different Sarah sounded on the phone. Gone was the bitter, desperate woman who used to call me asking for loans. This new Sarah was confident, happy, and seemed genuinely at peace with her life. She would tell me about the beautiful sunsets from her balcony, the nice neighbors in her building, and how she was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. As her older brother, I was proud of her transformation. For the next 2 years, I continued working odd jobs while waiting for my pension. I took a job at Home Depot, worked as a security guard on weekends, and even did some landscaping work despite my aging knees and back. Margaret was understanding, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes every time another month passed without the pension starting. Our dream retirement was becoming a nightmare of financial stress. Sarah, meanwhile, was living it up in Florida. Her social media was filled with pictures of her luxurious lifestyle. She was dining at expensive restaurants like Joe's Stone Crab, taking weekend cruises to the Bahamas, and had even bought a brand new red Lexus convertible. She joined a country club and started playing golf, something she had never shown interest in before. She looked tan, healthy, and happier than I had ever seen her. During family gatherings, Sarah would fly back to Michigan and regale us with stories of her Florida life. She talked about her new friends at the country club, her weekly tennis lessons, and the charity work she was doing with local animal shelters. My daughter Jennifer was especially impressed with her aunt's transformation. Jennifer had always looked up to Sarah despite her problems, and seeing her successful and happy was inspiring to her. But there were little things that didn't add up. Sarah never gave clear answers about her investments or which aunt had left her money. When I mentioned that I didn't remember Aunt Martha having much money, Sarah would quickly change the subject. She also seemed to have an unlimited supply of cash. At family dinners, she would insist on paying for everyone, leaving $100 tips that seemed excessive even for someone who was doing well. The most puzzling thing was her knowledge of financial matters. Sarah had never been good with money, yet suddenly she was talking about mutual funds, real estate markets, and retirement planning like she was a financial advisor. When I asked her for advice about my delayed pension, she would get uncomfortable and suggest I just be patient. "These government things always take time, Bobby," she would say, using my childhood nickname. "You'll get your money eventually." In 2021, Margaret's health started declining. She developed arthritis in her hands from years of working, and the stress of our financial situation was giving her anxiety attacks. She started taking medication and seeing a therapist. Our son Michael offered to help us financially, but I was too proud to accept money from my kids. I kept telling myself that any day now, the pension would start coming and everything would be okay. Sarah seemed oblivious to our struggles. During her visits, she would show up with expensive gifts for everyone, designer purses for Margaret and Jennifer, high-end tools for me, and luxury toys for the grandchildren. When Margaret mentioned that we were worried about affording her new medication, Sarah offered to pay for it without hesitation. At the time, I thought she was just being generous with her newfound wealth. Christmas 2022 was particularly painful. Sarah arrived in a rental Mercedes and brought gifts that probably cost more than I made in 3 months of part-time work. She gave Margaret a $500 spa package, bought me a top-of-the-line fishing rod that cost $300, and handed our grandson Tyler a PlayStation 5 like it was nothing. The generosity felt overwhelming, and I started feeling like a failure as a provider. That's when I noticed something strange. Sarah kept getting phone calls that she would step outside to take. When I asked her about it, she said it was her financial advisor calling about some investments. But one time, I overheard part of a conversation where she was talking to someone about monthly payments and keeping the paperwork straight. It struck me as odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The breaking point came in March 2023. Margaret fell at work and injured her hip. The medical bills were piling up, and we were facing the possibility of losing our house. I had swallowed my pride and was about to ask Michael for help when I decided to make one more serious effort to track down my pension. I went to the Social Security office in person instead of calling. I figured if I could sit down with someone face to face, maybe I could get better answers about what was happening with my benefits. The young clerk, a woman named Jessica, pulled up my file on her computer and immediately got a confused expression on her face. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, looking back and forth between me and her computer screen, "I'm going to need you to wait here for a moment." She disappeared into a back office and returned with her supervisor, an older man named Frank who had been working there for 20 years. Frank looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. He sat down across from me and said the words that changed everything. "Mr. Mitchell, according to our records, you died in a car accident in February 2019. Your death certificate is right here in our system." I laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of joke. "Well, I'm obviously not dead," I said. I'm sitting right here talking to you." But Frank wasn't laughing. He showed me the computer screen, and there it was, a death certificate with my name, social security number, and date of birth. According to the document, Robert James Mitchell had died in a single-car accident on February 15, 2019, on Interstate 75 near Toledo, Ohio. The cause of death was listed as multiple trauma from motor vehicle accident. My heart started racing. "This has to be some kind of mistake," I said. "Someone with the same name must have died and the records got mixed up." Frank shook his head. "The social security number matches exactly, Mr. Mitchell. And look here, your sister Sarah Mitchell is listed as the informant who provided the death information. She's also listed as the beneficiary for survivor benefits." The room started spinning. I felt like I was going to be sick. "What survivor benefits?" I managed to ask. "Your pension, sir. Your sister has been receiving monthly survivor payments of $3,200 for the past 4 years. That's over $150,000 so far." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The woman I had trusted my entire life, the sister I had protected and supported through all her troubles, had literally erased me from existence and stolen my retirement. While I had been working myself into the ground and watching my wife's health deteriorate from stress, Sarah had been living the high life in Florida on my money. Frank continued explaining the situation. The pension office had been sending checks directly to Sarah's Florida address since March 2019. She had provided them with a death certificate, a copy of my will, which I had never made, and documentation claiming she was my only surviving relative and designated beneficiary. "But I'm married," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My wife Margaret should be the beneficiary, not my sister." Frank looked uncomfortable. "According to the paperwork your sister provided, you were divorced and had no children. She claimed she was your only living relative." The lies kept piling up. Not only had Sarah declared me dead, but she had also erased my wife and children from existence. In Sarah's version of reality, I was a lonely bachelor who had died tragically and left everything to his devoted sister. I immediately called Margaret from the Social Security office. She could barely understand what I was saying through my tears and rage. When I finally explained the situation, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Bobby," she said quietly, "are you telling me that while I've been working at the grocery store and we've been struggling to pay for my medication, your sister has been stealing your pension?" "Yes," I said. "She's been stealing from us for 4 years." The drive home was a blur. I called my son Michael and told him everything. He was furious and immediately offered to fly home from California to help us deal with the situation. My daughter Jennifer was so shocked she couldn't speak when I told her. Sarah had been like a second mother to her, and the betrayal felt personal. But the worst part was still to come. When I got home and told Margaret the full story, she revealed something that made the situation even more devastating. "Bob," she said, "I need to tell you something. Remember when your mother was dying in the hospital and Sarah spent all that time with her those last few weeks?" I nodded. Sarah had been wonderful during that time, staying with our mother around the clock and handling all the arrangements after she passed. "Your mother told me something before she died," Margaret continued. "She said she was worried about Sarah's financial future, and she had set aside some money in a separate account for her. She made me promise not to tell you because she knew you would insist on splitting it evenly." My blood ran cold. "How much money?" $50,000. "Your mother felt guilty about leaving most of the estate to you, so she wanted Sarah to have something extra." The pieces were falling into place. Sarah had received $50,000 from our mother's hidden account, But instead of using it responsibly, she had probably spent it quickly and then looked for another source of income. That's when she must have come up with the plan to fake my death and steal my pension. I was devastated by this revelation. Not only had Sarah betrayed me, but she had also manipulated our dying mother and convinced Margaret to keep secrets from me. The web of lies went back years, and I was just beginning to understand how deep it went. The next step was confronting Sarah directly. I called her Florida number, my hands shaking as I dialed. When she answered, she sounded relaxed and happy, probably just coming back from the beach or the country club. "Bobby," she said cheerfully, "what a nice surprise. How are you and Margaret doing?" "I'm calling from the Social Security office, Sarah," I said, my voice cold and controlled. "They've just informed me that I'm apparently dead." There was a long pause. Then Sarah laughed nervously. "What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense." "They showed me the death certificate, Sarah. The one you filed 4 years ago. They also showed me the records of the pension payments you've been receiving." Another pause, longer this time. When Sarah spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the cheerful, confident tone. Now she sounded like the desperate, cornered woman I remembered from years past. "Bobby, I can explain," she said. "Then explain," I said. "Explain how you declared your own brother dead and stole his pension while he struggled to make ends meet." Sarah started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and anger. "You don't understand," she said. "I was desperate. I had nothing. You had everything: a house, a wife, kids, a secure future. I had nothing to look forward to except poverty and loneliness. So you decided to steal from me." "I wasn't stealing," she said, her voice rising. "I was borrowing. I was going to pay you back when I got on my feet. By living in a luxury condo and buying a Lexus. That's your idea of getting on your feet. I deserve to have something nice for once in my life." She screamed. "Do you know what it's like to watch everyone else succeed while you fail at everything? I spent my whole life being the family screw-up while you were the golden child." The conversation devolved into a screaming match that lasted over an hour. Sarah alternated between trying to justify her actions and blaming me for her problems. She claimed that our parents had always favored me, that I had been given opportunities she never had, and that I owed her something for all the years she had struggled. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the call. In her anger, Sarah let slip something that changed everything I thought I knew about our family. "Besides," she said, "I'm not the only one keeping secrets in this family. Ask Margaret about the letters." "What letters?" I demanded. "Ask her about the letters from the pension office. Ask her why she's been hiding them from you." My heart sank. "What are you talking about?" "The pension office has been sending letters to your house for 2 years, Bobby. Letters asking about discrepancies in your file. Margaret has been intercepting them and hiding them from you." I felt like I had been hit by a truck. "You're lying." "I check the junk drawer in your kitchen. Check behind the photo albums on the bookshelf. Your precious wife has been hiding the truth from you just like I have." I hung up the phone and ran to the kitchen. In the back of the junk drawer, behind old batteries and rubber bands, I found them. A stack of letters from the pension office, all addressed to me, all dated within the last 2 years. My hands were shaking as I opened them. The letters detailed discrepancies in my file and requested that I contact them immediately to resolve issues with my death certificate. The pension office had been trying to reach me because some of their automated systems had flagged my case as suspicious. But Margaret had been hiding the letters, probably hoping the situation would resolve itself somehow. When Margaret came home from work that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the letters spread out in front of me. She took one look at the scene and broke down crying. "I'm sorry, Bob," she said. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. How long have you known? I asked. About 6 months. The first letter came in September and I opened it by mistake. When I realized what it meant, I panicked. I didn't know how to tell you that Sarah had declared you dead. I kept hoping I could figure out a way to fix it without hurting you. I felt betrayed by everyone I loved. My sister had stolen my identity and my pension. My wife had been hiding crucial information from me. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Margaret, I said, did you know about the money my mother left for Sarah? She nodded through her tears. Your mother made me promise not to tell you. She was afraid you would make Sarah split it. And when Sarah suddenly got rich and moved to Florida, you didn't connect the dots. I thought maybe she had invested the money well, or maybe she really had gotten lucky with stocks like she said. I wanted to believe she had turned her life around. The next few weeks were a nightmare of legal proceedings and investigations. I hired an attorney, contacted the pension office, and filed a police report. The investigation revealed the full extent of Sarah's fraud. She had used connections from her troubled past to obtain a fake death certificate. Her second ex-husband, a man named Danny Rodriguez who had served time for forgery, had introduced her to someone who specialized in creating false documents. Sarah had paid $5,000 for the fake death certificate and supporting documentation. But the plan was more elaborate than I had initially realized. Sarah hadn't just stolen my pension. She had also applied for Social Security survivor benefits, claiming she was caring for our elderly mother, who had already been dead for 2 years when Sarah filed the claim. She had received an additional $800 per month in fraudulent Social Security payments. The investigation also revealed that Sarah had been using my Social Security number to establish credit. She had taken out 3 credit cards in my name and had been using them to fund her lifestyle. The total debt she had accumulated was over $40,000. But perhaps the most shocking discovery was that Sarah had an accomplice. Her neighbor in Miami, a woman named Rita Gonzalez, had been helping her maintain the fraud. Rita worked as a clerk at a local government office and had been providing Sarah with insider information about how to navigate the bureaucracy and avoid detection. Rita had also been coaching Sarah on how to respond to any questions from pension administrators or Social Security investigators. The 2 women had developed elaborate backstories about my supposed death and Sarah's role as my grieving sister and caretaker. The police arrested Sarah when she flew back to Michigan for our cousin's wedding in July 2023. She had the audacity to show up at the church in a designer dress and expensive jewelry, acting like nothing had happened. When Detective Maria Santos and her partner approached Sarah during the reception, she initially tried to run. The arrest scene was humiliating for our entire family. Sarah was handcuffed in front of dozens of relatives who had no idea what was going on. My nephew Tommy, who was getting married, was furious that his wedding had been disrupted. Several family members blamed me for having Sarah arrested at a family event, not understanding the full scope of what she had done. During the arraignment, Sarah pleaded not guilty and claimed she was the victim of a misunderstanding. Her court-appointed lawyer tried to argue that Sarah had genuinely believed I was dead and had filed for survivor benefits in good faith. The story was that Sarah had received a phone call from someone claiming to be a police officer who told her I had died in an accident. Panic-stricken and grief-stricken, she had rushed to file all the necessary paperwork without properly verifying the information. It was a ridiculous story that fell apart under scrutiny. The prosecution easily proved that Sarah had paid for the fake death certificate and had been actively deceiving multiple government agencies for years. The evidence was overwhelming, including bank records, credit card statements, and testimony from her accomplice Rita, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. But Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. During the trial, she tried to paint herself as a victim of family favoritism and emotional abuse. She claimed that our parents had damaged her psychologically by always comparing her to me, and that she had turned to fraud as a way of evening the score. Sarah's testimony was painful to hear. She talked about feeling invisible and unwanted throughout her childhood. She claimed that our father had once told her she would never amount to anything, and that our mother had always made it clear that I was the favorite child. Some of her claims had elements of truth. Our parents had worried about Sarah's choices and had sometimes been critical of her lifestyle. But she twisted every family interaction into evidence of some grand conspiracy against her. The most hurtful part of her testimony was when she claimed that I had always looked down on her and had never offered to help her when she was struggling. This was completely false. I had lent Sarah money countless times over the years, had co-signed loans for her, and had even let her live with Margaret and me for 6 months when she was between jobs. But Sarah presented herself as a victim who had been abandoned by her family and forced to resort to desperate measures to survive. The trial lasted 3 weeks and tore our family apart. Some relatives believed Sarah's sob story and thought I was being too harsh by prosecuting her. Others were appalled by her actions and supported me completely. The stress of the trial and the public nature of the proceedings took a toll on everyone involved. Margaret's health continued to deteriorate during this period. The anxiety and stress of the legal proceedings triggered panic attacks, and she had to increase her medication. She blamed herself for not telling me about the letters sooner, convinced that we could have stopped Sarah's fraud earlier if she had been more courageous. Our children were also struggling with the betrayal. Jennifer had always been close to Sarah and felt personally deceived by someone she had trusted and admired. Michael was furious and wanted to sue Sarah for damages beyond what the criminal court could provide. The family dynamics that had taken decades to build were crumbling under the weight of Sarah's deception. The prosecution's case was airtight. In addition to the fake death certificate and fraudulent benefit claims, they found evidence that Sarah had been planning the scheme for months before implementing it. Investigators found notebooks in her Miami condo containing detailed plans for maintaining the fraud, including scripts for phone calls to government offices and strategies for avoiding detection. They also found evidence that Sarah had been researching other potential targets. She had been looking into the backgrounds of other family members and friends, apparently considering whether she could pull off similar frauds against other people. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had mentioned that Sarah had been asking strange questions about her late husband's military pension during one of her visits to Michigan. The judge sentenced Sarah to 8 years in federal prison for identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, and Social Security fraud. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $267,000, covering not only the money she had stolen, but also the legal costs, interest, and penalties. Rita, her accomplice, received a 2-year sentence and was ordered to pay $15,000 in fines. She had been a relatively minor player in the scheme, mainly providing advice and emotional support to Sarah, but her position as a government employee made her actions particularly serious. During the sentencing hearing, the judge gave Sarah an opportunity to address the court. I expected her to show some remorse or apologize for the pain she had caused our family. Instead, she used the opportunity to deliver a bitter speech about how she had been victimized by a system that favors men over women and by a family that had never appreciated her. "I may have broken the law," she said, "but my brother broke my heart and my spirit years ago. The money I took was nothing compared to the emotional damage this family inflicted on me." Even in that moment, facing 8 years in prison, Sarah was unable to take responsibility for her actions or show genuine remorse for the harm she had caused. The aftermath of the trial was almost as difficult as the fraud itself. The pension office restored my benefits, but the bureaucratic process took months to complete. During that time, Margaret and I continued to struggle financially while waiting for the back payments and regular monthly checks to start coming. The media attention was overwhelming and embarrassing. Local news stations picked up the story, and it became a cautionary tale about family betrayal and identity theft. Reporters called our house constantly, and we had to change our phone number twice. The story even made national news when a cable television show featured it as an example of family fraud. Our relationships with extended family members were permanently damaged. Sarah's children, my nephew Jake and niece Lisa, felt caught in the middle between loyalty to their mother and outrage over her actions. Jake, who was in college at the time, was so humiliated by the publicity that he changed his major and transferred to a school in another state. Lisa, who was married with young children, was angry at both Sarah and me. She felt that I should have handled the situation privately within the family instead of involving the police and the courts. She accused me of destroying her children's relationship with their grandmother and creating a scandal that would follow the family for years. The stress of the situation also affected our marriage in ways I hadn't anticipated. Margaret and I found ourselves arguing about things that had never been issues before. She resented having to work during what should have been our retirement years. I resented her for hiding the letters from the pension office. We started couples counseling, but the damage to our trust took years to repair. Our finances were also permanently affected. Even after my pension was restored and I received the back payments, we had lost years of retirement savings and had accumulated debt during the period when we were struggling. The legal fees alone cost us over $25,000, money that came out of our retirement nest egg. Margaret's health never fully recovered from the stress of those years. The anxiety and panic attacks became chronic conditions that required ongoing treatment. She had to retire from her part-time job at the grocery store because the stress was too much for her to handle. The restitution ordered by the court was largely meaningless. Sarah had already spent most of the money she had stolen, and her assets in Florida were minimal once the condo was sold and the proceeds were applied to her debts. We received partial payments over several years, but we never recovered the full amount of our losses. Sarah served 6 years of her 8-year sentence and was released in 2029. She was prohibited from contacting me or any member of my family as part of her parole conditions. According to our cousin Mary, who maintained some contact with her, Sarah moved to a small apartment in Phoenix and took a job at a call center. She never married again and seems to live a quiet, solitary life. I'm told that Sarah still blames me for her problems and shows no real remorse for what she did. She apparently tells people that I overreacted to a family dispute and that the prison sentence was excessive. Even now, years later, she seems unable to understand the full impact of her actions on our family. The experience changed me in fundamental ways. I'm more cautious about trusting people, even family members. I double-check all important documents and maintain closer oversight of our financial affairs. Margaret and I hired a financial advisor and take a more active role in managing our retirement accounts and benefits. We also made legal changes to protect ourselves from future fraud. We have better security on our credit reports, have established clear documentation of our beneficiaries, and have given our children power of attorney in case anything happens to us. The innocence and trust we once had in family relationships is gone forever. The hardest part is dealing with the ongoing family dynamics. Sarah's actions didn't just affect Margaret and me, they rippled through our entire extended family. Holiday gatherings are awkward because people don't know whether it's appropriate to mention Sarah or ask about her situation. Some family members still maintain contact with her, which creates tension with those of us who consider her actions unforgivable. Our grandchildren, who are now old enough to understand what happened, struggle with how to think about their great-aunt Sarah. They remember her as a fun, generous person who brought expensive gifts and told exciting stories about her life in Florida. Learning that it was all built on lies and theft has been confusing and upsetting for them. Looking back now, I can see warning signs that I missed at the time. Sarah's sudden wealth should have raised more red flags. Her evasive answers about her finances should have concerned me more. Her detailed knowledge of retirement benefits and government procedures should have seemed suspicious for someone who had never worked in those fields. But I think the truth is that I wanted to believe Sarah had finally turned her life around. I wanted to believe that the sister I had protected and supported throughout our childhood had found success and happiness. The alternative, that she was capable of such elaborate deception and betrayal, was too painful to consider until the evidence was undeniable. The experience taught me that family relationships are more fragile than I had realized. The bonds that I thought were unbreakable, the shared history, the childhood memories, the mutual support through difficult times meant nothing to Sarah when she saw an opportunity to improve her situation at my expense. It also taught me about the vulnerability of older Americans to financial fraud, even from people they trust. The systems that are supposed to protect us, Social Security, pension administrators, credit reporting agencies, are surprisingly easy to manipulate if you know how to work them. Sarah's fraud succeeded for so long partly because these institutions assume that family members are honest and have each other's best interests at heart. Today, Margaret and I are finally enjoying a modest retirement, though it's not the carefree golden years we had planned. We take small trips, spend time with our grandchildren, and try to focus on the positive aspects of our lives. But the shadow of Sarah's betrayal still hangs over us, a reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered and how long it takes to rebuild a sense of security. I still struggle with anger and resentment. There are days when I think about Sarah living her quiet life in Phoenix, and I wonder if she ever thinks about what she put us through. Does she ever feel guilty about the years Margaret had to work when she should have been retired? Does she ever consider the damage she did to our family relationships? Does she understand that her actions affected not just me, but everyone who loved and trusted her? The rational part of me knows that holding on to anger is destructive and that I need to focus on moving forward. But the emotional part of me still feels the sting of betrayal from someone who was supposed to love and protect me. Family is supposed to be the one constant in life, the relationship you can count on no matter what happens. When that foundation is shattered, it's hard to know what you can truly rely on. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.